Spring, 1942. America needs millions of submachine guns, but the iconic Thompson costs a fortune, and factories cannot keep up. The urgent solution is a weapon so crude it looks like a mechanic's grease gun, designed by car makers, stamped from steel, and rushed into battle at 1/8 the price. Yet soon German patrols learned to fear its slow, ominous chug more than any polished firearm. Why did such an ugly expedient shake the enemy's confidence and rewrite the rules of wartime firepower? The true story begins with an industrial gamble. The Thompson submachine gun stood as a symbol of American firepower, but by 1942, it had become a burden on the nation's war machine. Each Thompson demanded more than 20 hours of skilled machining, the kind of work only experienced gunsmiths with specialized equipment could deliver. That meant every weapon rolled out at a snail's pace, even as the Army's orders climbed into the millions. The price tag matched the craftsmanship, over $200 per gun, a sum that would buy several rifles or feed a family for months. For a country fighting on two fronts, that math did not add up. Factories already stretched thin with tanks, planes, and artillery could not divert their best machinists to crank out submachine guns. The bottleneck grew tighter with every new demand from the front. American planners studied what the British and Germans were doing, turning out Stens and MP-40 by the hundreds of thousands, using methods that looked more like car manufacturing than traditional gun making. The Thompson, with its milled steel receiver and polished wood, belonged to another era. As the war's tempo increased, the gap between what soldiers needed and what factories could supply became impossible to ignore. Infantry squads, tank crews, engineers, and paratroopers all clamored for compact automatic weapons. The Army's logistical officers faced a hard truth. The Thompson might be beloved, but it was simply too slow and too expensive to keep up with the demands of global war. Even with wartime shortcuts and simplified models, the cost and labor required still dwarfed what other nations managed with stamped steel and assembly lines. In meeting rooms and production offices, the pressure mounted. If America could not arm its expanding forces, the cost would be measured in lost battles, not just dollars. The search began for a weapon that could be built fast, cheap, and in staggering numbers. A gun that did not need a master craftsman but could be pieced together by the same workers stamping out car parts in Detroit and Indiana. The answer would not come from tradition or pride in fine machining. It would come from a willingness to break with the past and gamble on a new kind of manufacturing. The stakes were nothing less than the ability to equip an army on the move. Guide Lamp Division in Anderson, Indiana, was used to stamping out car headlights, not firearms. Yet in the fall of 1942, the Army handed them a challenge: build a submachine gun that could be produced by the thousands, fast and cheap. The answer was not a refined weapon. It was a lesson in assembly line ingenuity. George Hyde, working with General Motors' Inland Division, sketched a design that threw away nearly every tradition of gun making. The receiver was nothing more than a steel tube, seam welded like plumbing pipe. The lower housing was stamped and folded, then pinned together with a single oversized hinge. The stock was 2 lengths of steel wire, bent and welded, that could double as a cleaning rod or a lever for barrel changes. Only the bolt, barrel, and a handful of trigger parts needed real machining. Everything else, the body, stock, even the magazine housing, came straight from the stamping press. The open bolt blowback action meant there was no need for a complicated locking system. It was simplicity, boiled down to its bare essentials. On the factory floor, automotive workers who had never built a gun before could assemble one in a matter of hours. The whole process cost about $20 per unit, less than a tenth of the original Thompson's price tag. The first prototypes rolled out in just about 90 days. That kind of speed was unheard of in the world of military arms. The Army's technical officers could hardly believe it. A working submachine gun, designed and tooled for mass production, in the time it usually took to finalize blueprints. Guide lamp engineers did not fuss over polish or presentation. They built the M3 to be handled with greasy hands and dropped in the mud. Its plain, cylindrical receiver and stubby barrel gave it the look of a mechanic's oil gun. Soldiers who first saw it on the assembly line or in training camps gave it a nickname that stuck: grease gun. There were no decorative flourishes, no wooden furniture, no attempt to disguise its industrial roots. The charging handle was a simple crank bolted onto the side. The stock collapsed with a push and a twist. Every design choice was about speed, cost, and utility. The goal was not to impress, but to equip. By early 1943, Guide Lamp was ready to start full production. Thousands of M3s would soon be rolling off the line, each one a testament to the power of stamped steel and American manufacturing. What began as a desperate solution to a wartime bottleneck was about to become one of the most recognizable and unlikely icons of World War II. First impressions of the so-called grease gun were anything but reassuring. Soldiers handed the new weapon in training camps or supply depots, often stared at it in disbelief. The stamped steel body felt light and hollow. The wire stock rattled, and the side-mounted crank seemed like an afterthought. Compared to the solid heft of the Thompson, the M3 looked and sounded like a tool snatched from a mechanic's bench. Rumors spread quickly. Some men joked it would fall apart if dropped, or jam at the first hint of mud. In the hands of a GI, it felt more like a gamble than a guarantee. But the real test came far from the safety of the assembly line. In the hedgerows of Normandy, the forests of Belgium, and the muddy lanes of Italy, the M3 faced the kind of abuse no blueprint could predict. Infantrymen and tank crews dragged it through rain, snow, and the thick, clinging earth of European battlefields. Where the Thompson's finely machined parts could seize up with grit, the M3's loose tolerances let mud and water shake free. The open bolt, blowback system had fewer parts to fail, and the stamped receiver could take a beating without warping. Even after being dropped in a ditch or soaked in a stream, a quick rinse was often enough to get the gun firing again. Tank crews especially came to rely on the M3's compact frame. Inside a Sherman, space was measured in inches, not feet. A full-length rifle or even a Thompson with its fixed stock could snag on hatches or get pinned behind gear. The grease gun's folding wire stock and short barrel made it easy to stash within arm's reach, ready to grab in an emergency. When a crew had to bail out fast, that compactness could mean the difference between escape and disaster. In the chaos after a tank was hit, there wasn't time to fumble with a heavy weapon. The M3 was built for that moment, quick to deploy, simple to use, and unlikely to jam when it mattered most. For infantry, the M3's slow, steady rate of fire, about 450 rounds per minute, proved more than a technical detail. In close quarters, where every shot counted, the weapon's deliberate rhythm made it easier to control. Compared to the Thompson's rapid climb and heavy recoil, the grease gun stayed on target. Short bursts were manageable, even for soldiers with little automatic weapons training. The .45 caliber ACP round still hit with authority, but the gun didn't buck wildly or spray rounds off course. Each trigger pull felt intentional, not frantic. As weeks turned into months, doubts faded. Reports from the front described a weapon that shrugged off mud, kept firing in the rain, and was easy to keep running with minimal tools. It wasn't pretty, and it never inspired pride of ownership. But it worked. In the end, reliability won out over looks. The grease gun earned its place not by dazzling anyone on the parade ground, but by surviving the worst conditions the war could throw at it. For the men who carried it, that was all that mattered. Inside a Sherman, the world shrank to metal walls and inches of breathing room. When a shell struck or smoke filled the turret, survival meant moving fast. The grease gun's folding wire stock and stubby barrel let it ride in brackets near the escape hatch, never buried under gear. A full-length rifle or even a Thompson could snag on a hatch rim or get wedged behind a radio. The M3 could be grabbed in one hand and hauled out in a single motion. For tank crews, that difference was measured in seconds, the kind that separated a clean escape from disaster. Crewmen learned to keep the grease gun close, not because it was beautiful, but because it was practical. In the chaos after a tank was hit, a man could roll out, hit the dirt, and already have his weapon ready to fire. The gun's compact build meant it did not catch on webbing or get tangled with the other men scrambling for cover. A tank commander could lay down a burst to keep enemy infantry back while his driver or loader crawled for safety. In those moments, the grease gun was not just a tool, it was a lifeline. The gun's sound was a warning all its own. Unlike the sharp, rapid staccato of the German MP-40 or the higher-pitched chatter of a machine gun, the M3's slow, heavy rhythm echoed through hedgerows and ruined villages. Each burst, about 450 rounds a minute, came out as a deliberate, chugging clatter. German patrols, especially those moving at night or through thick bocage, learned to recognize that sound. Reports from the Ardennes and Lorraine describe short, dense bursts of automatic fire with a dull, mechanical tone, distinct from anything in the German arsenal. In the words of one German NCO, the heavy, chugging bursts from American armored infantry meant trouble was close and escape routes were running out. German unit diaries and patrol logs from late 1944 mention this Dumpfies, Zugendes, Feuer, dull, chugging fire coming from American armored vehicles and infantry groups. Training updates warned patrols to take cover and avoid returning fire with their own MP-40s if they heard this specific rhythm. The distinctive sound, especially in the dark or in the woods, signaled not just the presence of Americans, but the likelihood of a sudden, close-range fight. Tank-mounted grease guns, fired in short bursts, could pin down a patrol or break up an ambush before it even started. On both sides, the psychological effect was real. For American crews, the M3 was a last line of defense, always within reach. For German patrols, the slow, chugging bursts in the night meant their luck had run out. The grease gun's battlefield reputation grew not from its looks or its price tag, but from its presence in the tightest, most dangerous corners of the war. A crude, stamped steel answer to the question of survival in close quarters. In December 1944, the M3A1 was standardized, and with it came one of the strangest simplifications in American small arms history. Designers took a hard look at the M3 side-mounted crank handle, a part that bent, broke, or jammed more often than anyone liked. The solution was radical. They removed it entirely. Instead of a charging handle, they milled an oval recess directly into the bolt. To cock the weapon, a soldier would lock the bolt forward, slip a finger into the bolt's shallow slot through the enlarged ejection port, and pull it straight back until it caught on the sear. It looked odd, felt crude, and forced the trigger finger of every GI to do double duty as a piece of machinery. Yet in practice, this bizarre method shaved off another part that could fail, snag, or slow production. The M3A1 went even further in its pursuit of minimalism. The ejection port was widened, making it easier to clear jams and to load the gun. A sturdier magazine catch replaced the old, easily bent design. Even the oil can, vital for keeping the gun running in mud and rain, was tucked into the pistol grip itself, always within reach. Each tweak aimed to cut cost, speed up assembly, and remove anything that did not absolutely need to be there. By the time production wrapped up, the M3A1 was a masterclass in wartime pragmatism. It was not pretty, but it was even less likely to let its user down. In the hands of a tank crew or a paratrooper, the fewer the moving parts, the better the odds of firing back when it mattered. Decades after World War II, the grease gun refused to disappear. While most wartime weapons were scrapped or locked away, the M3 and its simplified M3A1 variant kept turning up in armories from Korea to Vietnam and beyond. Tank crews, armored cavalry, and vehicle operators kept them close, trusting the same stamped steel and wire stock that had once raised so many doubts. The military's vast stockpiles, built up in the rush of the 1940s, meant there was always a grease gun ready for any unit that needed compact firepower, no matter how many years had passed since its debut. In the shadowy world of special operations, the grease gun found a second life. Its slow, steady rate of fire and subsonic .45 caliber rounds made it an ideal candidate for suppressed missions. While only a handful of experimental suppressed M3s were ever built, the weapon's reputation traveled through the ranks of intelligence services and clandestine units. OSS teams in World War II and later Cold War operatives valued any tool that could deliver quiet, reliable bursts at close range. The grease gun's simple mechanics meant it could be kept running with little more than a bottle of oil and a rag, even in the hands of a lone operator far from supply lines. For most, the grease gun was just a cheap emergency weapon. For a select few, it became part of the silent kit, issued not for show, but for the kind of work that left no records. Long after newer guns came and went, the unassuming M3 remained tucked away in armories and special operations inventories, its ugly lines hiding decades of secret service. Right now, military designers still wrestle with the same trade-off: perfection versus production, beauty versus utility. The ugly solution that simply works can outlast the elegant one, sometimes for generations. When the stakes are survival, reliability wins every time. That lesson shapes every new weapon, every battlefield, and every decision about what truly matters. What would you choose if everything depended on it?